welcome to Goblination, and today we will be discussing how to get into Unreal Engine. Now, first thing, when I launch Unreal Engine, it'll open up this screen right here. And before I do anything, I would recommend that you go to File, New Level. Now, level in Unreal is basically like scene in Maya. And the first thing that I would do, you can choose whatever it is you want. Don't forget open world, empty with black. That means that there's no lights in there. What I'm using usually the basic, which has light setup, and it has a few elements that you can work with. I will do create, and it opens up a new scene or level for me. And this is great. Now we'll talk about the interface today, and maybe a little bit extras, and I will also show you how it looks or relates to Maya. So, what do we have here? We have all the conventional top bar with the file when you can open, save, export, all that stuff. We will not really discuss all these things that you can have. For example, build, where you can build lighting, you can build geometry. As a game engine, you want to be updated, and if you update the lighting, sometimes it will give you an error that lighting needs to be updated because it saves it or caches it. But we'll discuss other things. Now you get a clean overview of this is your stage right here. There's a lot of icons and there's a lot of things that might be looking or seeming intimidating, but trust me, everything will make so much more sense soon. Now, what are all these icons? What is all this? As you can see, I'm moving around with holding down the Alt button, just like in Maya, and with the left mouse and taking it left or right, it basically does exactly what Maya would do. Now all these icons, these are representation of what's in the scene. And you can see that when I select each one of them, when I select this one, for example, it highlights something here, but it also highlights something on the right-hand side. And if you look up a little bit, you will see that the name of this window is the outliner. And yes, this is just like in Maya. The outliner represents exactly the same thing. Now, what did I select? I selected the play of stars. Now, don't forget, this is a game engine. That means that player is part of what needs to be done in a game engine like Unreal Engine. Now, you see the eye over here, and basically it will toggle between visibility on or off. If I close the eye, you will see that our representation is gone. Same thing with the floor. If I select the floor, it selects it in the outliner, but it also selected in our stage. If I close the eye, you'll see that it made the floor disappear. So that's basically basics of what makes sense in the outliner. Same thing with all the lights. If I select all the lights and all the effects and I turn them off, you'll see that everything turns black. So we'll get to the outliner again, but now I want to move around the engine. If I come to the stage and I want to move just like I like to move in Maya, which is holding the Alt key down on my keyboard, and then with the middle mouse, then dragging my mouse to the left. For some reason, the camera or the stage or the scene moves to the right. And if I do the same thing by holding the middle mouse, the Alt key, and moving to the right, the scene moves to the left. It is flipped. And if I go up, it'll go up. If I go down, it'll go down. This is still by holding down the middle mouse and the Alt key. Now there's a way to change it because it's more comfortable for us Maya users to use it just like in Maya. And I'll show you how to do that. In order to do that, we'll do that first. We'll go to Edit, go to Editor Preferences, and it will open up this window for you. Here, I will do the search. That's a nice thing about Unreal Engine. Anything that you need is searchable. You can be surprised of how many things, or from how many windows, you can search for any specific thing. So here, I know what I need to look for, and I will start by typing in middle, because I want the middle mouse button pan. And you can see that the controls, it populates what I need, what I was looking for. And it's in invert middle mouse pan. And all you have to do is check this to on. And now if I close this here, so it will stop the filter or the search, and I will do set as default. I will say yes to this and yes to this message. And now when I close it, it'll save it. It saved it in my preferences. So now if I hold down the Alt key at the middle mouse and I move to the left, you can see that my scene moves to the left and to the right properly, just like it would do in Maya. Now, what else do we have? We have the save key. We have the selection mode. So if you open it, there's selection, landscape, foliage, mesh, and so on. But for now, this is basically going to change a lot of the interface for you. And of course, it'll change your stage. And if I do animation, you'll see that it opened up tabs. Whatever it is that I use, it opens up tabs, new tabs that are relevant to what you want to work on. Let's go to selection, which is the default. So we have a little hamburger icon here, which opens up another set of menus. We have perspective, which is what we are on. So if I press on that, you can change it to top, and you can change it to left, right, or orthographic, basically, just like in software like Maya. Now this shows that it's lit. If you press on Alt 3, or if you go down here, unlit, that you can see that it is unlit. Now let's go into Maya for a second, and I'll show you comparison. So we have a scene, we have, now it's lit, so it's very, very similar. And of course, don't forget our outliner. So if I select the little lamp here, you can see that it's highlighted in the outliner. And here we have the attribute editor, which is interesting because people will ask, do you have attribute editor in Unreal? And the answer for it is yes. So let's go back to Unreal. So if I select the flow, for example, and I go down, you can see here, there's a little window called Details. And that is basically our attribute editor. Just like in Maya, we have the attribute editor in Unreal Engine. If you go into Window and go to Place Actors, it opens up this little window for you. Now, just like in Maya, that is very modular. Unreal Engine is also very modular. So basically, I can hold this, drag it out, and place it wherever I want. If I want it to be floating window, if I want it to be attached to our interface, just like it was, and it kind of shows you where it's going to snap to. You can choose what you want to do with it. And of course, don't get alarmed if this shrinks your stage. You can always come with a cursor and scale it down to the size that you really want. So now with this place actors, it shows you that you can add many things. For example, an actor, which is basically like an empty group or a null, a character, pawn, play of start, point light, all that stuff. Or you can be very specific. If you go to lights, you have all the lights that you can add. Just like in Maya, you can add them in Unreal Engine. Cinematic stuff, we will talk about cinematic stuff. Shapes, you can add the cube. Let's drag it into the scene. Let's drag a cylinder. Let's drag a cone. And you can move them around. So now if I select, let's say, the cube, and I look to the right here, to the details, meaning this attribute editor, you can see what we can do here. You can see all the options that you can change in the options of that little cube. But there's also the static mesh component and the cube itself. So if I press on this, you can see that I can change the location, which is the translate, the rotation, or the scale. This shows that it's unlocked. It means that each channel will be scaled individually. But if you want to lock it so it'll scale uniformly, so you can see that it scales the same way on every channel. And of course, these are the translate properties. Here, that little arrow here, this is like that in Unreal throughout. If you press on that, it will zero the numbers out for you. So now you can see that our cube is located in the middle of the scene, 0, 0 point. And because the pivot point of the cube is in the center, that's why the cube is going into the ground. You can, of course, raise it up, and you can move it around on the translate. And the pressing F will zoom into an object that you're selecting. So if I select the cylinder and I press F, you can see that it zooms in and out, just like in Maya, exactly the same way like in Maya. The next thing about the Unreal Engine as well is if something is high up and you press on the End key on your keyboard, it will snap that object to where the ground is, which is kind of convenient. So now that we have all our stuff, we have a little bit of objects that were dragged from the place actors to the scene. We have the attribute editor, which is the details window. We have our outliner, which showcasing all the elements that we have in our scene. Let's say if I drop the cast shadow off, let's select the cube and do cast shadow, you see that we have shadow on and off, just like what we have in Maya. Now if I want to cast shadows, I will press on this a button right here, on and off. Let's do some ambient occlusion, make it a little bit sharper. So we have our scene with a sphere that is casting shadows, very much the same. But what else do we have? What else can we do understanding the interface of Unreal Engine 5.3? Now you notice that when I move around, up and down, there's a little bit of hiccup, or it seems like it snaps, and it does. What happens is, here we have the representation of the tools that we can use or how to move around in Engine. And you can see that there's a blue highlight on 3 different options here. Basically, that's what it is. If I take this and move it to, let's say, 50, and I move this around, you'll see that it snaps. You can really distinguish the snap. So if you basically press on that and hit this and that, now you will have smooth movement like you would expect to have. By the way, you can turn it on and off. So if I now rotate, you'll see that the rotation also causes those snaps until I will press on these again, and now everything would run smooth for you. Now if I want to zero it out, don't forget, go to the static mesh options, 0, and 0 this down, or take it up, press end, and it will be on the floor. The shortcuts for translate, rotate, or scale are just like in Maya. W-E-R. So W will do the translate, E will do rotate, and R would give you the scale. Now if we continue on this section right here, you see that there's camera speed, which is on 1 right now. Now what happens if I zoom out and I go all the way and I zoom out very, very far from my object? And now if I want to move, let's move a little bit further, go really far. And now when I move around, when I move and pan around, but when I really, really want to move, you can see that it moves kind of slow. So here you can change the speed of the camera when you're too far. And now when I move around, you can see that the speed is significantly to my liking. When it comes to camera being so far away, or depending on what the camera is doing and how far it is from the object. You can always go back and change it to 1, and then you can press on the F key so it will zoom back in, and the camera is working really well on speed of 1 when you're close to the object that you're basically focusing on. Scale, rotate, translate. You can also add surface snapping. So if you turn it on, you can see that I'm moving around, but as soon as I move close to the surface, it will snap to the collision surface that we have. So let's uncheck this. So now when I move around, you can see that we're free moving. It's not snapping to anything with collision. Press on the End key. Notice, right now we are in world space. If I press on this, this is local space. What does that mean? That means that if I rotate our cube, and you can see that the pivot point, if I press on W and E, you will see that the pivot point goes with the world. If I press on this, you'll see that it changed to local, which means it goes to the cube space. That's why the pivot is looking this way, and this is the world space, just like in Maya. Let's go back into Maya for a second. We are in a local space, and if I press on Control Shift right click on top of the object and I change it to world, you'll see that the pivot point changed to the world space. So it's basically the same thing that we can do in Maya. You can do it in Unreal Engine. Let's take this to 0 and let's put it back on the ground. So we have local space and we have world space. Now there's also a shortcut for world and local. Right now I'm in world space. If you press on the Control and the tilde key, it will change it for you from world space to local space. Another thing that is very, very important in Unreal Engine, if you go to Window and you go to Content Browser and you press on Content Browser 1, you'll open up this window. Now, Content Browser is basically the main thing in Unreal Engine. It's a container that holds everything that you might need or have, and then you can basically take it from the Content Browser into your scene, and then you will see it here in the outliner. Now, Content Browser, if you close it, you can also reestablish it. If you just want it for a second, if you press on the Control and space bar, it'll open it up, and once you are done, it'll take it off. But if you want to keep the Content Browser at all times, go to the window and then look for the Content Browser and do Content Browser 1. You can have up to 4 content browsers open at the same time. And this is where you start. So we have the content, and then from here you basically add everything and anything you need in the scene. Now there are a few other things that I would like you to edit as a checkmarks, and I'll show you what they are. So if I go back to Edit, Editor Preferences, and now I would look for Look and Feel, and I'm talking about the 3 elements on the top. Enable Combined Translate Rotate widget, turn it on. Enable Arcball Rotate, turn this on. And enable Screen Rotate, turn this on. And since we were searching for something and it's a filter, I will close it and then do the same thing as we did with the middle pen. Set as default, say yes to all those notifications and close it. So now what happened is if I select the cube and I press on the T to rotate, you can see, just like in Maya, you can see that another thing has been added, which is the screen rotate. If you go back into Maya for a second, that blue circle around the pivot, that is basically our screen rotate. And since in Maya, if I am in rotation and I hold down the left mouse and I turn around, or when I move around the mouse, we can rotate that in Maya. So we don't really rotate by channel, but we rotate from the center of the cube or where the pivot is on the cube, and we rotate around, so we are not committed to one channel. And that is what we did with the Arcball in Unreal Engine. So right now I'm in rotation. If I use the screen rotate, you can see that that's what it does, just like in Maya, undo. And now because I have the Arcball selected, if I do the same thing in Unreal, holding down the left mouse and moving around the mouse, we can see that I am rotating from the center or from where the pivot point is, and I'm not committed to one channel only. And sometimes you want to do that, to rotate from the center or to rotate from where the pivot point is. Just to show you, if I do editor preferences and I look for Arcball, if I move it around and I'll uncheck it. So now if I come here and I'm trying to do the same thing, because the Arcball is not checked, you can see that I'm not even turning or spinning our cube. It's actually moving around like in a game, because we are in a game engine. We move around like in a game, and not in the scene that we want to animate in. But we do rotate via each channel that we choose, Y, X, or Z. Once I turn this on, there you go. We can rotate from the center or from where the pivot point is of that specific object. Now, let's say you're very happy with the layout and the way it is, and you want to keep it like that for other projects. You go to Window, and you go to Save Layout, and Save Layout As, and we'll call it Getting to Unreal Engine, and you save it. So now, even if you close all the windows by mistake or on purpose, and you want to come back to your layout, you just go to Windows, Load Layout, Getting to Unreal Engine, and your layout has been loaded again. Nothing happened, no harm done. Now, if you want to move around, or you want to pose a character, or whatever it is that you want to do, and you want to have a little bit more real estate on your screen, if you hit the F11 on your keyboard, it'll basically put it on full screen, and you can move around or pose the character the way you want it to be very specific, and just for editing and workflow. And press F11 again, it will go back from full screen to your stage size, just like in your layout. Now, there's also different orthographic views that you can see, and just like in Maya, if I press on this, you can see that there are other orthographic views. Right now, we have right, back, top. So if we press on this, we can do this left, and you can move around. Now, you move around differently in the orthographic views. You just move with your right mouse button pressed, and you move around. And if you add the left mouse button, it will basically zoom in and out. So it's just right mouse push down and move the mouse. It will move around like this, left and right. And if you add the left mouse button push down, it'll zoom in and out. Now, another thing that you can do is you don't have to stay with the 4 panes. You can edit that as well. So if I go to, let's say, the perspective, and I press here and go into layout, you can see that there's a few options for layout. Right now we are on 4 panes. You can change it to 1 big pane and 3 on the side, or you can change it to 2 panes. And here again, you have the option to change it to whatever you want. Just to unlit and zoom out. move it around, so you can do 4 panes or 2 panes. And if you want to zoom in here, you basically press on that icon here, and it will take it in and out as you want, and you can always change it back to layouts and go back and just zoom in to one pane as you wish. Now let's say you are in a specific camera and you want to animate to that camera and you want to keep that angle, even if it's just for one session. We can do a bookmark of the camera, and it's very easy. So let's say I like this angle. I will hold down the control and I will choose a number from 0 to 9 and just press on that, so I can add different angles. So let's say like this angle, I will press control and the number 1, and then I would move around and I will say, okay, this is another one that is interesting. I will press control and number 2, and then let's do something that is more broad, control and number 3. So now if let's say you move around and you want to go back to those cameras, I will just now press on the number 1, number 2, and number 3. You had 10 options to create different bookmarks for your cameras. And then of course you can add a real camera and keep it there, lock it there, because there's so many times in Maya that we move around and we forget. Now the nice thing about Maya, let's go back to Maya for a second. This is our camera, this is the scene. And this is the camera, and we keep working and we're animating, or we're doing a scene, we're working on it, and then for some reason we moved around and we basically ruined our initial framing. What we could do, by pressing on the square brackets, it'll go to our previous frames or the previous framing of the camera until you get back to the frame or the framing that you initially had. So it keeps it in cache, or it keeps it in memory, and you can go back and forth with square brackets left or right. So in Unreal we don't have that, but we do have the bookmarks of our cameras by control and the number, you up from 1 to 0, and then you can go back to those frames if you by mistake moved around, and of course you did not lock the camera like you should do in Maya as well. Now let's say you are showing the scene and you want to show it to your director, you want to show it to a supervisor, or you want to just show it for yourself, and you want to not see those icons. Let's say they're distracting for you. You can always press on the G button on the keyboard and it will clean up your scene. You will not have those, and you can bring it back by pressing the G. So there you go. We have a cleaner overview of what the scene looks like, and we can move on from here. So don't forget outliner, just like in Maya. Details, like the attribute editor, just like in Maya. Place actors, which will give us the option to add elements to our scene, from geometry to shapes, like video effects, media plates, and all that fun stuff that you can do in Unreal, and all happening in real time. Now, what else can we do in Content Browser? What exactly do I mean by Content Browser having everything that you need to create a full-fledged project? So let's go back to our Epic Games library. Let's say I want to add elements to my project, and we'll start with Control Rig Sample Pack, and it will add that to project. Now we'll choose Getting into Unreal Engine. Then I'm back to our scene. You can see that a folder has been added to the Content Browser. I didn't really need to get out of the engine and go back to it. It populated it immediately as it was downloading it from online Epic Games library. So once I go in, you can see that there are some characters and some props that we can work on. this will be a good segue for our next video, which will cover some more interesting things about Unreal Engine. And I hope that this video is going to put you in the right spot to start playing, no pun intended, with Unreal Engine, to get to know the interface before we move on to more interesting and intriguing things in Engine. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And until the next time, Goblination.